This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Koenji. We've had to sort of alter our plans here a little bit. We were going to record in the coffee shop, and then we got too cold, and we were going to go out and record in the park, and we came out and it was pouring rain. So we're just in like an entryway to something. There are just stairs going up and down from where we're sitting, and a pair of glass doors. But anyway, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the first time in maybe a year, I feel relatively unstressed about my life. Maybe longer, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we've had a little bit of a break here from Critiquing Comics. Because I went to the States with my kids, and also to sort of let the queue build up again. We were kind of running out of comics to critique, but now we've got quite a pile again. And we're going to talk about a couple of things here. So this is on the top of the pile, so let's just pick this up. So our friend Oscar, who... I think he was on, well, I interviewed him once, actually, in a park.
Yeah.
And on Deconstructing Comics. And I think I talked to him at one of the shows once when I was doing a podcast also, probably Kai Guy last year. And also, if you're a patron, you would have heard him with us talking about Solo, a Star Wars story. And this is a comic by him called Tabi, which is Japanese for a trip, a journey, and it's a silent comic. So this is something he's printed up to sell at conventions, and it's A5 size, I think.
Yeah.
And it's about a rabbit who has a very wide sword. When he's standing here with it on the cover, I almost thought that it was like the wicket for cricket.
Okay. Is it maybe not two swords in one?
Well, looking at it through the comic, like here,
okay,
it's just one really wide sword.
Yeah.
On the, what is this, the fourth page of story. So, yeah, silent comic. He's walking through the desert. His canteen is empty. And then he finds this huge plant that has, like, some kind of big pods on it that are almost as big as him. And he cuts one open, and it has some kind of liquid in it, which apparently is drinkable. And then there are these really big lizard-type creatures that come toward him. And at this point, I started having a little trouble understanding the story. Because he kind of swings the sword around, and there's a panel with just a sound effect and sort of spraying liquid coming from off-panel. And now this comic has one spot color, which is yellow. And it doesn't look very good when there's yellow liquid coming out of his canteen. I think I might have chosen a different spot color. But anyway, the splattering liquid in this case is black, and I thought, well, like, did he cut the lizard? But then on the next page, it appears that he's cut another one of the pods. And for some reason, the rabbit and the lizard each have their backs to each other with the pod in the middle. And it sits like that for 3 panels, a whole page, and then the next page is a full page panel of the pod suddenly splitting in two. And I think maybe what he's going for here is, it's kind of a staple of samurai movies where the samurai swings the sword and then there's a couple beats of silence and then suddenly the thing falls in half or crumbles or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I think that's absolutely what he's going for.
I think that's what it is, yeah. And then the rabbit and the lizards are all drinking from the liquid inside the pod, and then the rabbit moves on. It's interesting. Like I said, I had a couple of quibbles with it there that I already expressed, but I thought it was pretty good. What did you think?
I actually like it quite a bit. Now, previously we reviewed Kai, which is about a person jumping into the ocean and becoming these different sea creatures. This one is a little bit less abstract, and that one was done with blue as its secondary color. This one is done with yellow, and if I remember correctly, it's because Oscar wanted to kind of experiment with various colors, but just doing a single color at a time. And so he chose yellow this time. I wouldn't have chosen yellow because yellow is kind of a hard color to work with, but for what he's done, I don't think it's bad at all. The story I quite like because there's this idea that in a desolate place like the desert, you scavenge for what you can, and the devil take the hindmost is kind of the way people do it, or the way creatures do it. So the fact that there's this confrontation between him and a lizard in the desert in front of this tree, or a group of lizards, and he swings his sword and there's a flash of liquid, and you think, oh shit, did he kill the lizard? And then, no, he cut the fruit so everybody could drink. It's just a really nice philosophical sentiment that I think is... It kind of betrays the expectation, but at the same time, it says there is another way. A sword is not a killing machine, but a tool to help everyone in some
Okay, I
some
can
cases.
see that.
So, I mean, just for that alone, I think the story is actually quite good. A couple of things that I had problems with. With Kai, I was kind of mentoring him to kind of pull the comic, the level of the comic up. He originally printed as a black and white, and then it became a two-color risograph comic. And the experience was really, really hard for him, but he really worked hard, and the results are excellent. But because I was there, I was able to help him with one thing that he doesn't quite have a grasp on yet, and that's like the edge of the page. So there's a lot of negative space here, and sometimes unreasonably large amounts.
Yeah, that's true. It could have, except for the cover, it could have comfortably been trimmed much more. I mean, it could have been a much smaller book.
Yeah, or the pages would be that much.
Yeah,
more
or he could have printed them bigger,
yeah.
certainly.
So, even when he has the full bleed parts, the full bleed parts are full bleed, but the center comic part seems to be rather small on the page.
Yeah.
So he's still kind of working with that and trying to work it out. And I was absolutely not involved with the production on this at any time. If I had been there, I would have caught this and said, "Hey, no, fix this." But as it is, after the fact, he kind of realized his mistake, and I think for his next comic, he's really trying to focus on that. Regardless, though, the negative space doesn't really detract from the comic. I just noticed it as a mistake, a production mistake, rather than something that kind of destroys the comic.
Yeah.
It doesn't at all. In fact, some artists would say it's a stylistic choice. But I know the truth of it. But anyway, for me, of the works that I've seen of Oscar's, this is second only to Kai. Kai for me is his best work. Tabi is his second best work, and it's definitely worth picking up. But because he printed this on risograph, I think he might have a limited supply. Although this isn't a limited edition thing, so he may reprint it in the future.
Has he got this available online someplace, or else selling paper copies online?
He does, but I'll have to get you the address later. I think he put it up on Gumroad.
Yeah. Yes, on Twitter he's Big Fat Dog Comics. He doesn't have a URL on here.
But he's active on Twitter quite a bit, so if you just hit him up on at Big Fat Dog Comics, he will tell you where to purchase.
Buy an electronic copy of Tabi at gumroad.com/bigfatdogcomics.
Okay, our other comic this time is called The Quick and the Dad. It's a great title. This is from Ken Holtzhouser. If you're a To the Bat Poles listener, you would know his name, because as a patron, he's had an ad for this comic on To the Bat Poles once a month for some months now. I think since about the beginning of this year. And he was actually on our show once too, when we talked about the Green Hornet series from the 60s. So what this is, so it's about a father and his maybe early 20-something son, basically a boomer and a millennial, and the dad is wanting to belatedly kind of connect with his son, and in doing so he discovers that his son is a superhero, the Quick, who has taken over for the original superhero called the Quick, who has gotten older and retired, and part of becoming the Quick was to drink this special drink that gave him the powers, and it turns out that the dad has unknowingly taken in a certain amount of that stuff too, and isn't as strong as the Quick, but has some powers. Some not exactly powers, but invulnerability. So he's able to be. He talks the son into letting him be. Well, they can't decide if it's sidekick or partner, but he's anyway helping the Quick on his missions, and it's done in a really lighthearted way. There are some parts of it that were quite funny, I thought, and you see, Ken states in the inside front cover more than once he's kind of doing homage to things that he grew up with, including superhero comics, Archie comics. I caught at least one Batman 66 reference. I
got a kind of a feeling of Dennis the Menace somewhere.
Yeah,
in there too.
Yeah. There's Dennis the Menace in there, definitely. Right down to a character being named Mr. Wilson.
Yeah.
To make it completely obvious, but. Yeah, I thought the writing is good. The art is certainly not bad at all. I've seen him, he's posted on Facebook where he drew like Batman 66 characters, like from photos of, the cast in their costumes. And those are quite good. On this, I don't know, it wasn't quite what I was expecting. I think it might be a matter of the tools he's using. I felt like this kind of thick marker that he's using on a lot of things is not quite working somehow. I don't know, did you get that feeling?
There's a little bit of there's not much nuance between the thin line and the thick line that he uses. So it makes the thick markers really stand out. So with close-ups, it works very well. In fact, there seems to be a nice balance with some of the close-ups. You're looking at issue 3?
2.
2, yeah. So issue 1 was a bit rough, and it looked like a lot of it was done without Photoshop, or like Photoshop was used later, but that there's some the pages weren't adjusted, so the blacks are not truly black, and so you can kind of see the lines underneath the black. And there are some times where the lines are too light, or sometimes where they're too dark, and it just has a very rough feel because of that. It doesn't pull the blacks into pure black. In fact, I don't think there's any pure black in the book.
No,
it's always like a percentage of gray. And so this is kind of an editing error, really, because the artwork would go in as he drew it, and then in Photoshop you would just push the blacks up and push the whites up, so it would kind of clean up a little bit. But if you do that, some of his line work is too thin, so it would begin to disappear a little bit. So he's kind of walking this really fine line, which is tripping him up. The thin lines are a little too thin, and the thick lines are a little too thick. But about issue 1, that's kind of some of the problems that I had with the artwork. But the later issues, the artwork begins to develop, and you can see that he's paying attention to and critically thinking about what he did in the previous issue. So you can see that the composition begins to flow a little bit better. The word balloons versus the character position is a little bit better. Everything just kind of begins to pull together just a little bit better. And by issue 5, the cover artwork is becoming much better, although it looks a little Quimby-ish.
Well, the cover of issue 5, special guest cover artist Fred Hembeck.
Sorry, I was thinking Humbeck, not Quimby.
Yeah, so it is actually Hembeck drawing the cover.
Okay, then that explains that. Because the artwork...
I don't know how he got that, but...
I follow him on Facebook, and he's a brilliant guy, really, really friendly, and very approachable. I just follow him, and one day he sent me a happy birthday, which was a paragraph long, where he wrote this whole thing, and he did it for a couple of years, and it made my day. It made my year, because it was just so out of the blue and so lovely, and he's just really, really nice. So in that sense, I can kind of see him approaching Fred Hembeck. Why do I keep thinking Quimby? But anyway, I'm sure there was money involved, but he would do that. I could see it. But anyway, the artwork overall, I can see developing over issues. There's still some problems with line depth or line choice, thin and thick. It's a little bit too extreme, especially the thin lines don't need to be quite so thin, and the thick lines don't need to be quite so thick. But you can see where he's beginning to kind of understand his craft and really push it forward, and I appreciate that. But the thing that I really enjoyed about the book was the writing, in that the hero comes in and just tries to clobber everything, but the sidekick, the father, is just like, wait a minute, and he asks these questions. So he's kind of approaching it from this philosophical or logic standpoint, depending on the issue. But
and sometimes, like in that early issue, the villain turns out really hasn't thought things through. He's like,
And that's kind of a distraction while the son just clobbers the guy. But in a later issue where the alien comes down, he talks to the alien and says, okay, but what's the problem? And then that becomes the solution, rather than just clobbering the alien yet again. And so there is something to the father being a sidekick. He's adding to the story.
Well, I felt like the father's superpower is life experience.
Yeah, and it very much shows. where it's much more than just a kind of him acting as a foil for his son. It's him actually being a contributing member of the story and having agency there. And that's the thing that I really liked about the comic. That's where the value is for me. The art will catch up, but the story is the nicest part.
Yeah, it's got a lot of heart, as they say, and it's funny, and it's also superhero action. So
Yeah.
it's got a lot of different things going for it. I'm not quite sure how he's making this available. So what he sent me is 5 issues, which are, like standard American pamphlet comics, with
They're called floppies.
glossy covers. The interiors are black and white, and it's labeled as being published by questionable literature. Now, I don't know if that's just his imprint. I suppose it is. But I don't know if this is available from Diamond or anything. I kind of don't think so. But
Diamond's not about the indies.
let's see. I don't see a web address on here, but I'll try to drop in something about how to obtain this.
You said that the father is a baby boomer and the son is a millennial.
I would guess so. Yeah.
You're skipping a couple of generations there.
Well, I'm in between there. I mean, I don't even know what I am, because I'm technically the very beginning of Generation X, but I feel more like a boomer who kind of missed out on everything.
Oh, I don't think you're that old, but
Because I grew up, hearing about the 60s and liking 60s music, but I was born in 1965, so
Right.
I didn't really get to enjoy any of that stuff when it was happening.
I thought boomers were born in the 50s.
Technically, it's like from 46 to 64
Okay.
is the boomer generation, and I was 65, so
Okay, you just
I'm
missed.
the leading edge of Gen X, but I'm not
Yeah.
into Nirvana or anything like that, so
Oh, I'm
I don't feel
definitely
like
Gen
a Gen
X.
X. Yeah.
I was into new wave and punk back in the day, so
I think those of us born in the 60s need to come up with a different generation name for us, because we don't really fit either one.
that was the peace and love generation.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but anyway. So I kind of looked at the father as Gen X and the son as millennial, and then the grandfather as the baby boomer. Because actually that would be my family, my mother, me, and then my son.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the grandfather looks like Stan Lee.
Yeah, he does. He does.
I'm sure that's intentional.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, it's quite a charming book, and I think over a longer span of time, you'll see where the artist comes into his own and really starts to experiment with the medium. Right now, he's just kind of doing the rudimentary parts. He's doing well as far as story pacing and keeping everything in 16 pages, but he's starting to get kind of a finer edge about some of the storytelling techniques that he's got. And I think if you see this book collected in a sense, it sorry to compare it to my own work, but kind of like Weird Crime Theater, where I kind of cut my teeth on that book, and by the end, my style had kind of developed into something different than what it was when I first started.
And so you redrew a bunch of pages, as I recall.
I did, but there was a lot of stuff that in the beginning that I left as it was, because I fixed the things that were inconsistencies, like Granny's hair, or the fact that we changed his name from lesbian to Granny, and got rid of those references, and anything that just like didn't work story-wise that needed to be redrawn. I redrew that, but there's a lot of rough stuff in it from the first issue, and you can kind of see where it smooths out and kind of becomes more of a streamlined thing. And to a certain extent, I kind of began to understand what I was doing with the book by the second half of it, and I think you'll see the same thing here once it's collected. How long has he been working on this?
I don't know if there's any. Let's see. This is 3. Is there a? I don't think there's any like year on here or anything. I don't really know how long he's been doing this. Now he mentions in one of the opening areas. So he was self-publishing a different comic like around the year 2000, 2001. But only did a couple of issues at that time, and now I suppose as he's had kids, but they're getting a little older, and maybe he has time to do this again, and he's kind of trying to get back into getting a comic done.
Right.
So, but I don't know how long he's been working on this title.
Okay. No, I think it's solid. It's worth picking up. But I'd like to see what he does in the future, because I think he's growing and he's getting better.
Yeah.
You can buy The Quick and the Dad on paper or in digital form at indieplanet.us.
Well, as you've probably been able to hear during this podcast, there's been thunder going on outside.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if the rain's let up now. It feels like looks like it's still raining, but
A little bit better.
not as bad.
But man, I'm on bicycle.
Ooh, yeah, and I'm without an umbrella. So, but I would guess it's going to let up before too much longer.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else to talk about this time, or?
I don't have a whole lot. I have been looking at putting my comics online and finishing Mind Gator. I'm currently in the middle of writing issues 3 and 4, which I'm going to produce back to back, so there's no like giant hiatus. But for anybody who's waiting, when is number 3 going to come? And I occasionally say, oh, it'll be on sale in April. Oh, it's coming in August. Well, now it's August, and I'm still writing. It'll come when it comes. But I think I'll be putting Mind Gator 1 and 2 on Webtoons coming soon. It's not the preferable medium for that comic. That comic is much more of there's a very physical component to it. So my end goal is to like have everything available as a book or as 4 books. But to kind of build the audience, I'm going to put it on Webtoons and then promote there, and then Kickstarter the printing of issue 3 and issue 4, and see where it goes from there. But that's about it. I mean, I do have some other projects that I'm going to have to do for money, but I don't know what stage.
Comics can make money?
Well, when you're not footing the bill, yes, or at least a little bit of money. But I mean, I'm not sure exactly what stage of we're at in advertising the comic, so I can't really talk about it or offer any information, except I'm working on something on the side, which hopefully won't slow down Mind Gator too much, but still. I'd rather put out the comic when it's ready rather than rush it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get out of here. Maybe there's still thunder going on. Yeah. Well, I don't know. We might just have to get wet. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the next time we should be on Skype. Everything else we've got is electronic. So as far as submissions. So until next time, this is Tim.
And Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.